we praise the Lord that we're able to celebrate quietly again, although this time we have someone missing, but we're only in terms of eternity 1 centimetre away. Let people go to Jesus, don't hold on to them. We can go to them, they can't come to us. What she would be saying now is, make sure you get here also. It's gorgeous up here. On this day, I wanted to share with you a few thoughts precisely on the issue, because it's also the week in which we think about what happened at the Covadonga in 1917. It's been on my mind quite a lot that this is not sufficiently thought about. Why did Our Blessed Lady want to show these poor little mites the horrors of hell? If she did, there's a reason for it. She's a good mother, and we need to know about it and be aware of it. She also wanted this extra prayer added to each decade of the Rosary, and it mentions that place. She wants prayer for sinners, she wants a sacrifice for sinners. So in the context of losing your mother, it's a wider context. She's one of the lucky ones. She had a beautiful death, safe home. It's not the case for a huge proportion of humanity. Think how many die like that nowadays. The average is very much a different affair. I think you know what I mean. Now, Our Lady had a lot to say actually at Fatima, but it's not clearly known. Today I was looking again at the issue. Was there something not made known? It's a complex issue, but it needs to be known. Are you aware that Loris F. Capavilla, personal secretary to John the 23rd, knew things, and he was in conversation with Solideo Paolini, and we know what the content of it was, and it went in this vein. There are 2 envelopes. One is, and always has been, in the papal apartment itself, and in it is the actual word bit of the third secret. Now, this is historically true. There are other bits of evidence that is the case, and we have now got access to things which go into some detail about this envelope in the papal apartment. You may remember that in the Jubilee year there was a flurry of excitement that the third secret was going to be made known, and in June apparently it was. But it left people perplexed. It was different from the other 2 secrets, without words, without an explanation. It was a vision, a description of a vision. Now, there are evidences here and there which are historically accurate and beyond doubt indicate that when Sister Lucia, who was thought to be perhaps going to die in the 40s, she was not well at all, was anxious about the secret not having been even written down, and also the Bishop of Fatima wanting it to be at least written down, even though it might not be read. There was an instruction given. Now, basically, she did not, after the wish of the bishop go through with what he wanted, because it wasn't formal. And she did explain if he gave a formal command, she would be obliged to. So eventually he did, and even then she couldn't bring herself to write this written bit of the words. She just couldn't physically do it. And then she was given strength to write down the very words. And they were not to be opened before 1960. And it was written as a letter to the bishop who was requesting it. And he was not allowed to open it himself, but he was able to hold it up to the light like that and see through the envelope that it was one page, and he was able to clearly calculate that that was about 20 to 25 lines of writing, and certainly only one page, otherwise he wouldn't be able to see that. It was sent to the Vatican, but there was also the other one, and the other one was the one that was in the Holy Office, and it's the one that John Paul II asked to see after the assassination attempt, which of course happened on the 13th of May, and Our Lady protected him miraculously. In fact, when he went to see the Aqsa who'd shot him, the assassin didn't come with a please, please forgive me, but how are you alive? Just couldn't believe it, because he had skill and he was using a precision instrument. There was more than one shot fired, I believe, and it just couldn't be explained. We know now what happened. There was a miracle of protection. Now, with regard to what we know now, we need to be aware that as soon as John the 23rd opened it, he was taken aback, and he didn't feel he could make it known. There's a reason for that. That's the one that caused problems to Lucia and went into the papal apartment and was kept in an antique bit of furniture, which even has a name. It's called Barberigo, in the papal apartment. We know it's there. Paris Match, a famous French magazine, sent a journalist to make an article on the inside of the Vatican and even the papal apartment, and it was authenticated that this conversation took place. He was shown round by Sister Pasqualina, the nun who helped Pacelli and then Pius XII as he became, first of all in Munich when he was papal ambassador, when he was nuncio, and then as pope. She was by his side until he died, and a brilliant lady, one of the most powerful actually in the Catholic Church at the time, because of the power that she had, in the sense that she was very, very close to the top. Great help to the Pope, because he could trust her completely. And she was showing to this journalist, this French journalist, the papal apartment, and she showed Barberigo, this old antique, and did say to him clearly, in there is the third secret of Fatima. That was in 1957, before it was opened. Now, in the press conference that happened in the beginning of 1960, I think it was the 9th of February actually, the exact date, the verdict came through that it was not going to be made known, and it was put in this form: the words of the Blessed Virgin were not going to be made known. And another expression was part of it: the words that the three little shepherds heard. Actually, it was two sisters, or Lucia was a cousin of Jacinta, and the other two were brother and sister. Francesco heard from the other two what was said, because they were allowed to tell it to him. He only saw. But the girls heard, and Lucia had to write it That's why she was kept alive, to be able to diffuse the devotion to the Immaculate Heart and so on. But the word heard was in this declaration, this press conference there in February of 1960. So you've got words talked about there and heard. Now, therefore, we have that there. And we know also that as soon as Paul VI was elected, before he was even enthroned, he wanted to know where it was. And I think there was a bit of shuffling around in the inner circle. Where is the envelope? And someone said it's in that bit of antique furniture. So he read it. Immediately after his election, he was curious. And we know also that Capovilla knew exactly what went on, and he was pressed, and eventually he admitted to Solideo Paolini in this conversation, "Are there then two envelopes?" And his answer in Italian was, "Per l'appunto, that's the point." So the message was clear. There were two envelopes. Now, you remember how everyone was puzzled in the millennium, the year 2000 in June, that there was no clear interpretation, no words, no secret, just a vision. Now, do you remember how Mother Angelica, about a year later, came out with this on national television, basically, before millions of people? "I happen to be one of the ones who believes that not everything has been made known." And so people listened to her because she was very loyal to the Church and to the Pope. And about the same time, a controversy broke out amongst pious Christians: is there a cover-up? Now, a certain very good Italian journalist of great faith and loyal to the Church, Antonio Socci, at that point set out to write a book to blast, basically, those who maintained that there was a hidden part not made known. What nonsense. So he went to work as an investigative journalist and looked carefully into it. But what was his surprise when, as he got deeper into it, he found that all the evidence, like a jigsaw puzzle, was fitting into place to disprove what he was out to prove. And so he made a complete U-turn and himself wrote the book to indicate that there is actually a written part, the words, which have not been made known, and that's where they are. It caused a stir in the Vatican. Now, what had happened was, because the Vatican was aware that people were talking in this vein, they got the Secretary of State, Cardinal Sodano, to write a commentary, or he himself did so of his own bat. And so this was written, and the interpretation, therefore, coming from that authority was that it was all to do with the assassination attempt of John Paul II, and that it was all to do with the persecution of the Church, which was already happening at the time, or had happened in that century. And therefore, the issue was dodged. But because Antonio Socci had got onto this trail and written this book, it became a difficult situation for the Vatican to handle. And Cardinal Bertone, the second therefore after the Pope, started to try to defend the position, but never ever addressed the very issues that have been brought up in the book of Antonio Socci, indicating indirectly that he could not deny anything that he was saying, but the issue was just deflected. It got worse. Eventually, the same Cardinal Bertone was speaking in public, and when they saw that Antonio Socci was coming in, he wasn't allowed to go into the building. It's interesting, there was obviously something trying to be hidden. Now, if you remember, when both John Paul II and Pope Benedict went to Fatima, there was one thing in common. They both talked about certain parts of the Apocalypse, chapters 12 to 13. Now, what seems to have happened is this. I think John Paul II himself wanted to make known the written bit. He also, as soon as he was elected, wanted to know where the third secret was. He'd already read that way before his assassination attempt, because hardly into the papal apartment, he wanted to know where it was and read it. When, after his assassination attempt, he asked for it, what he was asking for was the bit he hadn't seen, the one that was in the papal, in the archives of the Holy Office, the one that was made known, which is actually far longer than one page. It's 4 pages and about 62 lines. The vision. So what seems to have gone on is this. They were nervous all along about revealing what Our Lady had said, because if you remember, it was a time of great excitement in the Church in 1960, a new spring, Second Vatican Council, and were it made known that this bit here, which in the 4th memoir, which the Vatican eventually made known properly, but eventually it was kind of, they were using the 3rd memoir, but the 4th memoir, Lucia has this bit in. In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. Now that bit was a key, because it means that there are words there following, and it's about the dogma of the faith. Now, the presumption is that therefore at least a part of the written bit, the words of the Virgin, are about a great crisis of faith to come after 1960. Now, do you see why it would be in the interests of John the 23rd to keep that hidden? But also, we know that Pius XII was already very much aware of certain things and was getting nervous in his own pontificate, and he was writing things like what he could see ahead, and he was warning against the suicide of altering the faith and the liturgy. He could see what was ahead, and there's a reason for that. He was already saying that in the 30s, but when he was Pope, he sent a emissary, a Jesuit, Father Schweigel, to get as much information as he could from Lucia, and he went. He wasn't allowed to say what he knew, all of it, but he was able to say certain things without breaking the secret. Of course, Pius XII, going back now to about 1957, was fully aware of this. And he came back and said that this third secret had 2 parts. One concerned the Pope, and the other had to do with the faith. And he was hinting that there was going to be a crisis of faith. Now, this kind of matters because there are other bits also that have come out from both John Paul II and Benedict XVI. When John Paul II in 1982 was addressing intellectuals at Fulda, they were asking him, pressing him, what about this secret? And he indirectly leaked out a few things. If it talks about the rising of the ocean to annihilate whole areas, about millions dying within seconds, and so on, and if it goes on, hinting that there is something cosmic there. But also we know that from the conversation that Pope Benedict had with the ambassador to the Holy See from the Philippines, Howard D., that this bit was agreed Benedict XVI knew the secret. But the message of Akita and that of Fatima are essentially the same. And what we have at Akita, it references to both a terrible cosmic crumbling and also to a crisis of faith. Cardinal against cardinal, bishop against bishop, and so on, which we find also accidentally word for word at Garabandal, which also was happening at the beginning of the 60s. When it came to, therefore, hiding this, they were pressing also Pope Benedict and Ratzinger before, because he, when he was only Cardinal Ratzinger, was interviewed in 1984 for the Jesus magazine. And he also leaked things at that point regarding these things. And John Paul II did make known this, that he also was not making it known because he foresaw that if it were made known, it would encourage the communists to take certain steps. Now, it would seem, therefore, that there are also elements linked with world history in there. And if the communists had known that the thing contained perhaps something of that nature, they might have done something even worse than they were trying to do in the mid-80s. And do you remember, by the way, how Pope John Paul II, on the 25th of March 1984, made a consecration to the Immaculate Heart? Our abbot did it in France, and all the bishops were in union with him. And we know from Gabriel Amort, the exorcist of Rome, that he wanted to explicitly put in the word Russia there. And the entourage was stopping him, and he was looking, even to the last minutes, he was saying, can I say, and they wouldn't let him. They didn't want to rub up Russia the wrong way. Remember, that was the Cold War, mid-80s. And it's said that he said it under his breath. And actually, even though it was not the full consecration requested by the Blessed Virgin, which explains why things haven't got that better, it did have an effect. We know that 6 weeks later, on the 13th of May, that same year, a huge convoy of nuclear missiles going towards a certain area in the north of Europe to break the umbrella of protection from the States, because under Carter there'd been a de-escalation there, détente, and they weren't ready. And it was the time to strike. Well, something went wrong, and the whole thing just blew up on them, and immediately afterwards they started making overtures of détente to the West. They were put back 2 years on their nuclear program, but that was Our Lady at that point stopping what probably would have been something awful for Europe coming from the communists. That's not quite well known, but it's the fact. And we know about it because it was happening, it was studied in France at the time. That was picked up on satellite intelligence. It was true. And it can be read if you want to historically. You have to Google it. Where am I getting to? This question of the ultimate message of Fatima is yet to be lived. Now, what happened, it seems, is this. The Vatican, in the year when they were making it known, decided that the Pope would do it this way. We will make known the vision, but indirectly you will make known the message. And so what they were doing, when John Paul II went to Fatima, and the same with Pope Benedict later, they referred to bits of the Apocalypse. The hint was there, loud and clear, that there was more to it than the actual vision, but you'd find it in the Apocalypse. And what do we have in the Apocalypse? This mountain coming down from heaven, the waters becoming all poisoned, acid, fire from heaven. It's all there. And the hint is there that there's something apocalyptic. So it rejoins what we know from Akita, which came out and was approved, even though now it's all hidden, and the hints that have come out here and there from John Paul II and Ratzinger as he then was. So just to be aware, there's obviously a lot, at least one page, that we have not heard. And also this bit with regard to the ultimate victory. Do you know the Cardinal of Lisbon and all the hierarchy of Poland, of Portugal, in 1931 made a consecration of Portugal to the Immaculate Heart. And there was a huge miracle, the Miracolo. It all happened. An explosion of vocations, preservation of Portugal from what was going to be a communist revolution within it, it calmed down. Protection of Portugal from involvement with the Spanish Civil War, protection of Portugal from the Second World War, and something which was obviously a foretaste of what was going to happen at the moment when explicitly the world and Russia was consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. We've had some kind of collapse of communism in the communist bloc, we've had return to Christianity, but there was more promised, and that is yet to come. As she said, it will be made, but late.